After having spent 25 years on state police and 3 years in a local department prior to that, I can see the frustration though, with a lot of the incidents, of people being killed for, I won't want to say no reason, but people being killed unjustifiably. And I think that goes to a lot of the hiring practices that are going on today, and the fact that people are in law enforcement positions that shouldn't be.
You want to look into that camera, and what advice would you give them?
Get your shit squared away, I'm coming looking for it. And we were fortunate enough, we had a very, very low incident of assault on troopers. It was instilled upon us that you treat people with respect,
sure,
and you get respect. But if you're disrespected, then you deal with it appropriately.
We talk about self-defense of women. They're just normal women. They could be housewives. They could be whatever. They're not trained fighters. So we tell them to have their emergency response technique, which is like, this is what you're going to do if someone attacks you.
Yeah, it comes down to muscle memory.
If someone has one technique to use, they're going to use it. If you've been martial arts for 30 years and you have 30,000 techniques, when the time comes to actually perform a technique, you don't know which one to use. Okay, guys, welcome to Becoming a Better You podcast. Today, I have for me, be lifelong friend. I've known you pretty much forever.
Since you were a little boy.
Little boy. I'm still the same height, I think.
Little man now.
So, with big arms. But anyway, so we have Darren Delaney, who is a former captain of the Rhode Island State Police. So we're going to talk a lot of things about policing, the history of that, also the martial arts, and some other things as well. So Darren, welcome.
Thank you.
So just kind of give me and the viewers just kind of a background of what you've done, your work, different things like that.
Well, I started in law enforcement when I was 17 as an auxiliary police officer in Danvers, Massachusetts. And then I was hired full-time in Bochner, Massachusetts when I was 19. And then I was selected to attend the Rhode Island State Police Recruit Academy in 1986. And I moved down to Rhode Island in the academy, and I graduated in 1987 and completed 25 years on the state police.
And so the highest rank you achieved was?
I was captain.
Okay.
And I was number 6 in the organization. Back then we had colonel, lieutenant colonel, 2 majors, and then 3 captains. So I was number 6.
And so what were your responsibilities when you were the captain?
As a captain?
Yeah.
I was in charge of the Northern Division. I was also in charge of Homeland Security after 9/11. And I was also, when I was a lieutenant on the state police, I was in charge of operations. Operations oversaw all our technical squads, SWAT, dive, K9, hostage negotiation.
Did you have to be trained in all of those things?
Not necessarily, but I oversaw them.
Okay.
And made sure they were prepared for their training and selection. And also was assigned to the Emergency Management Agency, where the operation officer was responsible for any major man-made or natural disaster. So pretty much from 2008, actually before that, when I was a lieutenant, I was responsible for the state police response to any natural disaster or any man-made.
So then the state police have more than just policing. It's also helping the community in different ways after disasters, stuff like that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think because when you think about like the state police, you think about, crime or traffic stops or, you don't, I think as a civilian, you don't think of everything that you guys do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot more entailed.
Right.
Obviously in the criminal aspect, the different bureaus and units that investigate crime and assist local departments with investigations, but also on a bigger scale, if you will. State police, in the operational role, deals with all the other state agencies and federal agencies.
Do they go through the state police?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and after 9/11, that all changed the duties and responsibilities of a lot of state agencies, but more particularly the state police.
So you were working 9/11?
Yeah, in Rhode Island. Yeah.
What was that like?
Hectic. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't know if we were, there was several incidents in Rhode Island and Providence.
And we're not far from New York.
No, it was a train station that, people were sighted on the train that fit a certain profile that was concerning at the time. It took us a while to really kind of coordinate with the federal and other local departments. So, and obviously, there was some concerns of, people coming out of Boston where, obviously two of the planes left Boston.
Yep.
And then obviously everything that happened in New York City and also D.C. So it changed the whole landscape of how we responded and actually how we prepared. Up until that point, we really didn't have a full-scale, operational, all-inclusive response plan.
So how did that change then? So from contrast or disaster, breeds new inventions. Like they say, when you have a war or when you have a epidemic, right, it leads to new improvements, new technologies. From COVID, different types of vaccines that are coming out. So how did that change the response for you guys? Was it more you work with other agencies? You now have, I'm going to say, platoons of people that this is their specialty where...
That was a big change.
Yeah.
Not only 9/11, but subsequent events after 9/11. We had the SARS, the NR2 scare several years ago. We have, pandemics back then as well. We actually had the weapons of mass destruction unit or committee that dealt with a lot of different issues. We also had the NR, I forget the actual acronym for it, but it dealt with
the bird flu?
It wasn't a bird flu. It was, I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but it was the state and federal agencies got involved with the dispersion of the antidote.
Okay.
For the specific
virus
that was out there. We actually, state police, we had to coordinate with the U.S. Marshals who were in charge of moving the meds from federal facilities to each state. And each state was responsible. So we worked with the health department to set up pods in every town to distribute those meds, if you will, and how to store it and secure it and all those type of things. So after 9/11, there was a big change in the mindset, not only on a federal level, but a state and municipal level to work together. And it was the first time we actually cross-pollinated with different agencies like the health department or DCYF or the DEM, just to address all the different issues.
So you weren't as isolated.
Oh, exactly, yeah. Because everybody brought their special skill sets
right
to the table, which we never had that before. And again, after 9/11, the federal government institutes the Federal Standards Committee, which basically were the FS. So each state agency had a specific responsibility within their wheelhouse. And then during a major incident, we'd commute at the Command Readiness Center on Route 2, where EMA oversaw the operations along with the National Guard. But each state function was ESF. So I believe the state police was 13, responsible for all law enforcement response in the state. DOT had theirs, health department had theirs. So every state agency had their own ESF.
Now I understand that, you have different, city police officers, state, you have the U.S. Marshals. It seems like, to me, just being a civilian, like, yes, everyone has their specialties, kind of like in healthcare, but it does get convoluted because they have their own policies and procedures, which might be different for the way another.
And that's what these ESFs basically did. They standardized everybody's
response
and policy and procedures. And obviously they have some type of command structure. You would have each agency, there'd be a lead agency within that structure.
Okay.
And it was a big changing curve for us because we never really trained that way. And then one of the other things that the federal government came out with afterwards was the incident command system. So everybody had to be certified in the different levels of incident command. Okay. So all the language and all the forms and all the protocols were the same, and everybody was versed on those type of protocols.
So it's kind of like in my wheelhouse, it'd be like you have a physical therapist, a chiropractor, a physician, a pain doctor, all working together for a patient.
Exactly.
Right?
All consulting.
Yeah, and you don't really see that a lot, but that's what, because they'd send him to the PT, but the PT doesn't ever interact with the physician, just through notes. Whereas the interdisciplinary team, in this case, all the different law enforcement or agencies, always yields a better result.
And then they'd all be working out of one house.
Oh, not a work. Yeah, exactly.
So, we had a major event coming up, whether it be weather related or terrorist or whatever.
So the response was faster.
The response was a lot. We would all be housed at the command post. And we all had, the most up-to-date technology. And we all broke out in meetings. So everyone was on the same page with what everyone else was doing.
Right.
And it basically solidified all the resources we had.
So talk to me then. So you became a police officer, a state trooper in the 80s?
1986 started the academy. I was 21 when I got in the academy. Right.
I was 3, and I still had a great smile, just so you know. Imagine that.
Well, I didn't have much of a choice growing up in Boston as an Irish Catholic.
Yeah, you have to go that way.
Proper politician. My father was on the Mass State Police. My uncles were...
Would the mob be an option too?
Yeah, the Irish mob didn't do too well.
Okay. So talk to me about the evolution of policing over the decades. So it'd be like the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, and now. How is it different?
It's changed over the years, but it's always been kind of the same.
Okay, the core is the same?
Pretty well, the mission is basically the same.
Which is?
Protect and serve, right? The mission's always been the same, but the way we complete the mission's changed greatly. Back in the 60s, and if you think about it too, a lot of people that go into law enforcement were former veterans. Think about World War II. When the war was over, there was
that's a skill set, right?
That was a skill set. And again, the psychology of the country at the time, a lot of people wanted to belong to something bigger than themselves. Whether in the military during the war or helping with the war effort. Then when they get out of the military, they transferred into these jobs that were very similar with the structure. Didn't make a lot of money, but there was benefits.
Right.
Benefits in, job security. And it's interesting too, that from an ethical standpoint, an ethnicity standpoint, certain ethnic groups levitated towards certain careers. Like if you think about it historically, Irish people kind of gravitated towards law enforcement or firefighters, public servant jobs. So that transition continued after Vietnam. A lot of people, again, with these same skill sets, they're still wanting to belong to something bigger than themselves. The affiliation with an organization was a big factor in that. And just like back in the day with social clubs, Knights of Columbus, the Masons, all those type of groups, there was a lot of people that wanted to belong to those. As we went through the 60s, we had upheaval in the country. We had the Vietnam War going on. We had protests going on. We had just a lot of upheaval. So law enforcement became somewhat separated from the general public. It was us against them.
So you're saying before that, it was almost like part of the community versus then it became, now you're enforcing your citizens that you're supposed to protect?
Exactly.
Okay.
In the 40s and 50s, it was a different mindset.
I got you.
It was a different mindset. There wasn't as much civil disobedience or civil unrest.
You weren't clashing?
Not as much, no.
Yeah.
You were focused on, specific.
Do you think that's society or that's
why? It was society.
Or
it was definitely society. Society was more.
Leave it to Beaver?
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, well, that's how it was portrayed, correct? I mean, you look at.
I don't know. That's 40 years before.
But if you look at if you watch classic TV or those type of things, that was the message that was constantly being
okay,
out.
That makes sense.
And there was social restraint and social structure more so in compliance.
Okay. Yeah.
During that time period. Now we enter into the 60s again with the advent of the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement and all those things. In the introduction of drugs into the society, the younger population started to rebel against the oppressive society of doing what you're told all the time.
Right. And
that's when law enforcement had a big change. It became us against them. And the other thing too was we went from a dealing with the public on a normal kind of basis to rapid response. Because
to quell the uprising.
Yeah. I can remember as a kid, in the late 60s, early 70s, coming down for breakfast, and my father was on the Mass State Police, and he was sitting at the kitchen table. He had a big bandage on his head, and his arm was in a sling. And he was at the Harvard riots. State police went in with the Boston police and the Cambridge police, to quell the Harvard riots, and he, obviously got pretty banged up. So as we progressed into the 70s, it kind of stayed the same. And then in the 80s, we had the advent of the drugs, the outbreak of crack cocaine and all those type of things. But that type of civil unrest and violence was somewhat restricted to inner city areas, with the different groups of that time that were on the bottom scale of society.
Right.
So it kind of more focused on that. Then in the late 80s and early 90s, the advent of community policing started, where we realized just crime fighting doesn't work. The big problem was again a disconnect not only between the law enforcement and the people they were dealing with, but also the other agencies that were out there, the social agencies.
Who were siding with the communities
some were,
yeah.
But the problem was, you statistically speaking, in any geographical area you look at when you're talking about enforcement procedures, you're always going to have that one area that has the highest volume of calls for service in crime. And the problem was the law enforcement would always respond to that, go there, lock people up, crack a few heads, and leave. But they'd have to go back again and again and again. And
so
again.
Nothing was fixed.
There was nothing was fixed.
Yeah.
So, as times changed, again, in the 80s and early 90s, we realized that our enforcement really wasn't working. And we got stricter on crime, 3 strikes you're out. Again, we had a big drug epidemic going on, just say no to drugs and all those type of things. We realized that you just can't lock people up. You have to address the core issues of, poverty and all the other ancillary issues that law enforcement just didn't look at and probably didn't care about per se. It wasn't their job. So during the 80s and 90s, the federal government came out and backed the community policing philosophy. Started out kind of like California, and they started dumping a ton of money into it. In the mid-90s, under the Clinton administration, they had the crime bill. And one of the big parts of the crime bill was they hired 100,000 police officers throughout the country to kind of stem the epidemic of crime. But they had to change the philosophy.
Right.
Because what was working in the past wasn't working because law enforcement will lock all these people up, and now you just burden the prisons. And they won't do so much time, they get out and start causing the same problem. So with the advent of community policing, it kind of changed our whole outlook and made us really look at the core problems and didn't really, per se, put the burden on us to fix it, but it gave us the understanding to reach out to the other resources that were geared to fix the problems. So you would reduce, it just made sense, you would reduce your calls for service in those areas if you can fix that problem.
Well, that's like in the medical field, right? I'm trying to fix what's actually wrong with you, your posture, versus just treating your shoulder because it hurts, right? Yeah. So I want to fix
a holistic approach,
right? Which always works better.
Yeah, it does. And so it kind of went back to the way it was before, where law enforcement had more of an obligation or more of a buy-in to the community, and it kind of tried to change the paradigm of us against them, which worked, for a while. But the problem was, in a lot of towns and cities, because I was very, very fortunate early in my career, back then it was crime prevention. And a local police officer, Denise Owens from Narragansett PD, was very, very big in crime prevention. She actually got me involved with it. And then from that, we kind of strayed off a little bit. And there was a group starting up in Hampshire at St. Anselm's College. Steve Morelli, who was a DEA agent at the time, kind of put this consortium together of local law enforcement. It ended up being 2 representatives from each state. And I was fortunate from the state police perspective to be on that consortium from Rhode Island. And basically, Steve Morelli, through the DEA, was able to fund our organization called NECP Squared 2, Community Policing Crime Prevention. And at the time, community policing was very, very big on the West Coast. So we kind of set up the symposiums up here. And I think for 5 or 6 years, out of St. Anselm's, we partnered with them, and we ran community policing trainings for all of New England.
So when you say community policing, how is that different from like policing?
It's just it's the same.
It's just a mindset?
It's a mindset.
Okay.
It's a philosophy. We're basically, like I just said, we're empowering our police officers and training our police officers to be problem solvers and to work with other agencies to resolve issues.
Okay. So it's more of like an upgraded mindset of training, like, again, fix the core problems,
Yeah, we're not here just to kick ass and take
Right, just not to lock people up.
Exactly.
Okay, I got you.
I'll give you a prime example. There was a district in one of the cities. It was a major drug area in actually Connecticut. It was a major drug thoroughfare. A lot of the abandoned houses were being used by the crackheads to sell crack. So the cops would go there all the time and lock people up. Well, what they ended up doing was getting the DOT, Department of Transportation, put up barriers so people couldn't drive through there as randomly, and also got the housing department to start condemning these buildings and knocking them down or boarding them up.
Right.
So now there's no way to do it. So it was those type of things, and also bringing in, social workers and things like that. So it was a combined effort, which really makes sense if you think about it.
So there's this big movement of community policing.
Correct.
Now it's 2023.
Again, just like anything else, the pendulum swings.
Okay.
And the changes come. I think, unfortunately, now we've gone back to us versus them in a lot of respects.
Because there's been things in the news where, unfortunately, people have got hurt or killed due to policing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And because that gets publicized, now everyone knows about it. So now you have this defund the police movement. You have all these movements. More than I've ever seen, it's us versus them. Now, obviously, people pick sides. Some people on the side of the police, some people aren't. But you definitely have this rift.
Oh, absolutely. 5 years on state police and 3 years in a local department prior to that. And everyone I have family in law enforcement. Everyone in my universe, for the most part, is involved in law enforcement in some way or another. I can see the frustration, though, over the last several years with a lot of the incidents, of people being killed for, I won't want to say no reason, but people being killed unjustifiably.
Right.
And I think that goes to a lot of the hiring practices that are going on today. I think that goes to a lot of the poor training that is going on today. And the fact that people are in law enforcement positions that shouldn't be, and probably wouldn't have cut the mustard, if you will, or
have the standards been lowered?
Absolutely.
I was something. I forget exactly what they were talking about. I think it might have been firefighting or the Army. But the standards are so low that they're putting people in these situations who are not ready to do the job. So when they get into, I think it was the Army, I could be wrong, but when they get into these situations, they're not prepared. Yeah. Right? But because they don't want to flunk anybody or they need more people, you're just pushing them through.
Yeah. It's a breakdown there, but it's also a breakdown within the institution. Because when I got on the Rhode Island State Police, there was a culture that was there that was very, very, very strong. That if you didn't live up to the ideals of that agency or the philosophy or the tradition of that particular agency or Rhode Island State Police in particular, you were ostracized. You were pretty much forced into shipping up or shipping out.
Right.
And that made a big difference. So you didn't have that many issues on duty or off duty because you wanted to become part of that. You wanted to belong to that.
And you walked the line.
And you walked the line because you had the senior people on that agency keeping you in line.
Well, listen, when I was a kid, I don't remember any state trooper under 6 foot. Right?
Yeah, there was.
Whether that's part of it or not, but that's just setting the tone of when I think state trooper now, as a almost 40-year-old man, I think you. You know what I'm saying?
Scary, isn't it?
What's that?
Scary, isn't it?
A little bit scary. But you know what I'm saying? That. But that's when you talk about the mentality. This is what we look for.
Well, that was the thing,
right?
The image. Or the facade,
that's what I'm saying.
Or the facade.
Yeah.
But you lived and died by that, and we were fortunate enough. We had a very, very low incident of assault on troopers.
Who's going to mess with you?
Well, it was a thing, though, that because it was instilled upon us that you treat people with respect.
Sure.
And you get respect. But if you're disrespected, then you deal with it appropriately.
Right.
And the reputation that the older troopers had passed on, it was like a legacy that was passed on to us. So it made our job a lot easier. But we were held to that accountability.
Almost like the old school martial arts training.
Same thing.
Right.
That's the applicability of the martial arts in law enforcement as well. It's a discipline. It's a discipline that you have to do and live by, and a code that you live by every day.
Well, I think nowadays society, if we just talk about men, teaches men to not be masculine or to not live up to these standards that I feel that you should be as a man, right? Like,
there's a balance, though.
Yeah.
When you talk about masculinity, there's a point where you could be too masculine and overbearing.
So are you talking about like when people say like toxic masculinity?
Yeah.
So I think when people say
You
that,
become a bully.
So, but here's the thing. I think when people say that, like, I don't think that's masculine. Like, if you're a bully or if you are treating somebody without respect, I don't think that's masculine. I think that's being an asshole. You know what I'm saying? I think people miscategorize it. When I say masculine, I'm like, okay, you can take care of yourself. You can take care of your family. You're strong, right? You can do these things that everyone has roles a man can do. I think when people go into like toxic masculinity, yeah, if you're yelling at that person or you're just beating that person up, that's not masculine. You're an ass.
No, yeah.
You know? But that's why we have to lower these standards now, because it's bad to be, you know, masculine, or it's bad to be strong, or, you know what I'm saying? Like these, and I think that when that happens, well, and they do studies where like testosterone nowadays in men is the lowest it's ever been.
Really?
Yeah, because like you're not, in order to produce testosterone, you eat a certain way, you do different things, right? The food you're eating. Well, if you're not as masculine, or you don't have that testosterone, you're not going to be as strong, or you're not going to be as aggressive. So like these standards for being these things have to be lowered because you can't actually get there anymore, right?
Yeah, I can see that point.
You know,
one of the things too is the person's self-identity.
Okay, go on.
It was at a point where years and years ago, there was, as I said before, there was a lot of people that went into law enforcement because they were prior military, or they wanted that sense of belonging, or in some factors it was a secure job with a pension,
right,
and great benefits, health benefits. But over time, that's changed. Especially when the job market wasn't really that good, and other jobs. Where else could you get a job where you didn't make a lot of money, but you had benefits?
So back in the day, that wasn't common.
No, when I started the State Police Academy, we were getting paid $125 a week, and we lived in the academy.
Yeah, okay.
I was fortunate that I was 21, didn't have a family, but a few of my classmates were married, and some of them had kids. A few of them dropped out because they just couldn't afford to be there. Historically speaking, those civil service jobs, you didn't make a lot of money. You really didn't. But again, it fit that kind of mindset that the people were used to, and there was camaraderie for the most part, and also there was a pension, and there was benefits that.
But nowadays,
yeah, that's all totally changed.
Yeah, well, because nowadays it's not as competitive, right? Because you can go to Google or Microsoft, you have a pension, you have stock options, you have.
Yeah, and they changed the pension system. Well, they had to change the pension system because it got outrageous.
Well, with that case too, when you're going to Google or Microsoft, you're not concerned with getting killed on the job.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's well, unless you have an active shooter situation.
I won't. But you know what I'm saying? Like that's not when we're doing risk assessment.
Yeah,
I could go here to these plushy, tech company, whereas before they didn't have that option, so it kind of pushed people into it.
But where's the fun in that?
I mean, listen, you got to live on the edge of things sometimes. So I know you did some training. I think you even taught when we talk about, responses to police calls and stuff like that. And can you just fill me in on like the biology? We know we have, if a police officer or anybody gets into a situation where it's fight or flight, like you're nervous, right? Your adrenaline spikes, stuff like that. Obviously, we've seen stuff in the media where people are getting shot, people are getting killed, reaction time. We know from the martial arts, like if you ever get into a fight, like even in the studio, like you get tunnel vision, like you're not able to react. A lot of the things we would do with like small joint manipulations don't work because you're just all over the place. You're not calm.
In a lot of defensive tactics programs in law enforcement don't teach that. I mean, we talked earlier, when I went through the academy in 1987, we had a very, very comprehensive and long boxing program, a brutal boxing program, which was kind of useless, realistically, because none of those skill sets really apply to a street situation, because the whole idea of use of force is to get that person under control.
In a police situation.
Yeah, in a police
and just
situation.
a normal civilian one.
Well, in a police situation, is get that person under control and in custody or in control as fast as you can.
With the least amount of force.
The least amount of force, depending on what the circumstances are. Like when we went through the academy, we had 2 troopers from Connecticut State Police, defensive tactic guys, come up and teach us goosenecks and wrist locks for 8 hours. Totally useless. And that was kind of a concern of mine. Over a couple of years, that there was really no defensive anywhere in Rhode Island, in pretty much anywhere throughout New England.
And what years are these?
Say 88, 89, 90, into like 92. There was really nothing out there. So, you'd have to find that outside through martial arts. And that's how I actually started martial arts with Professor Petronelli, our instructor over the years. Started with him in 1988, 89. But a lot of techniques that he was teaching really weren't applicable per se in a law enforcement setting. Like snapping someone's arm just to control. Right. It's not going to work. So there's a thing called NESPAC. It's the New England State Police Emergency Compact Act, which was started actually by Lieutenant Walter Stone, Rhode Island State Police in the 60s, where basically all the New England State Police, 6 states, colonels would get together on an annual basis to discuss criminal trends and those things and set certain training techniques and training curriculums. And from that, the NESPAC organization, it's basically set up initially if one state is having a major issue that they can invoke state police from the other states to come in and help them. They can either do it by themselves or the respective state's governor can call and invoke.
Like backup. Yeah,
we've done it. We've done it in Seabrook during the riots up in Seabrook at the nuclear power plant. We've done it. We did it in 2008 in Boston. We had the DNC. I was actually stationed up there with the Mass State Police. So it was a great organization for New England. And over the years, they started developing subsets of NESPAC. So every state that has a SWAT team, dive team, K-9 team, intelligence unit would meet on an annual basis to discuss different trends and do training and certifications and this and that. Well,
it's like discussing best practices.
Absolutely. And New England was the only state that was pretty much doing it. There was nowhere else in the country that was doing it on a regional basis. This has been going on since the 60s. And we also had an NCO school, non-commissioned officer school. So whenever you got promoted to a supervisory position, corporal or sergeant, in each state, we would hold a 2-week NCO school. So troopers from all of those states would come together for 2 weeks at our respective academies and go through the training, NESPAC, all just supervisory type of stuff. So basically in 2000, we were hosting NESPAC. So we needed topics to talk about. So, I expressed to Colonel Culhane at the time my concern about the defensive tactics programs being subpar. So he asked me to do a presentation to all the colonels. And, I told him, I said, the 2 biggest liabilities facing all our agencies is pursuits and use of force issues. So they agreed, and they basically said, well, do something about it. Set up a committee. So I was pretty much tasked out with setting up a committee. So I reached out to the defensive tactics instructors from all 6 states. And we got together. It was 2 from each state. So it was 12 of us. And we were tasked to put together a comprehensive, not only tactical approach, but also discuss, use of force, report writing, de-escalation type of stuff. So we were tired. It took us about over a year to get together and go over all the different techniques and then put together this very pretty package. And this was it right here, the New England Defensive Tactics.
Do they still use this today or a variation of it?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
They do. It was pretty much taught through, it was adopted by all 6 states. And you could take whatever portions you wanted to. But one of the things I kind of specialized in and really had an interest in was the dynamics of a confrontation.
So take me through that.
What takes place in the mindset.
So take me through the scenario where, okay, I'm a police officer. I'm going into a house, right? We think I've already been told that they're armed.
You get a call.
I get a call. Take me through it.
You get a call. The first thing you want to do is start role playing in your head before you get there. You know somewhat the nature of the call. What am I going to do first? What am I going to do when I get there? How am I going to handle this? So you have somewhat of a game plan, because the last thing you want to do is show up at a situation and not have a game plan.
Right.
Because now you have to use cognitive skills to think of what I'm going to do. Or if I kind of role play it in my brain and then relate back to my training, it would call it a high brain. My response is going to be somewhat instantaneous versus having to think about it.
Right. So, because when you're already in that state, you're not going to be thinking clearly.
No.
Right.
No, because now I get the old shit factor.
Yeah. Okay.
What am I going to do? And it sharpens your mind to go in and start thinking, again, based on my training, one of the things we really get into too is subject behavioral warning signs. So if I'm talking to somebody, the little cues I'm looking for that are going to tip me off.
Which are what?
Well, there's several of them. Target glance, staring at your gun. Because now, then a lot of these things are subconscious. The person doesn't know they're doing them. But if I'm trained in them and I'm paying attention and I'm thinking of the stuff, all of a sudden, boom, I see that clue, he's looking at my gun. So I kind of want to maybe turn my side away,
okay,
get some distance.
Clenching the fist.
Clenching the fist. This. Facial wipe's a big one. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this.
Can you demonstrate it for me?
The facial wipe is this. When you're talking to someone and they go like this. It's like they're putting like a protective cover on their face.
But like looking around.
Looking around too to see if anyone's around, anyone's coming to watch. Little subtle things, but a lot of times, if you don't know what to look for, even people who are trained in it, sometimes they get laxed in it. The other one, which is a behavioral type of thing, is they're acting very calm and being very submissive, and that's we call the calm before the storm.
They're kind of lulling you in.
Pretty much, yeah, and then looking down at the ground.
Because at that point, probably tempers are pretty flared, right? Like there's a lot of.
Well, it depends. You could show up at a scene where whatever it is, domestic or a verbal argument, and you start talking to somebody and they're very, very calm and easygoing, but all of a sudden these little subtle things are showing up, like staring at your gun, looking around,
or like maybe like a tick.
Yeah, tick. Shaking. The other thing is too, being overly emotional and then all of a sudden calming right down again. Obviously, there was a big lack in training in dealing with people with mental issues.
Sure.
There still is, in some respects.
Well, I think in any medical field, that's probably the next frontier.
That was in a lot of these things, we just kind of had to stumble along and learn. You kind of learned off the older guys that, when you're partnered with.
Well, let's put it this way. If the medical field doesn't know how to deal with the people with mental health issues, and that's their forum,
yeah,
how is the state police going to do it when you're learning from the medical community?
Yeah, when we started implementing them coming in.
That's what I'm saying. But if they hadn't figured it out yet, how to deal with it,
good point.
How are you guys going to figure it out?
Good point. So some of the other things.
I am a podcast host.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Some of the other things we would look at too. Again, the pre-attack body signs. Bladed foot. If you're standing there and they turn themselves like this, they shouldn't be doing it. You should be standing that way,
right.
With the gun kind of away and it's in a position of response. That's another. The other one is they drop their center of gravity right away. It's pretty much a clear indication that there's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So I talked about the clenching of the fist. So those are things that, there's nothing in the law or use of force doctrine that says you have to wait to be assaulted before you can use whatever level of force.
So I think that's an important point because we tell people, obviously we do self-defense here, right? So we tell people, hey, like if you feel threatened or if your intuition is telling you you're going to be attacked, well, if you can run away, run away. But you don't have to let them punch you in the face first to defend yourself.
Exactly.
You can poke them in the eye and run away.
We have to have a little more intuition.
Yeah.
Intuition is learned behavior. So, if I see somebody, doing those things I just mentioned, then to me that's a clear indication and based on my training, and if I can articulate that in my report,
the aggression level's going up.
Yeah, then I don't necessarily have to wait till they do something before I can take action.
Well, you put yourself at a huge disadvantage. Well, they could take out a knife and just stab you.
Every confrontation a law enforcement officer goes to, every call is a potential armed encounter because we bring the gun to the fight.
Good point.
26 to 28% of police officers every year are killed with their own gun. That's why the vest that we wear usually is strong enough to stop the round that we're specifically carrying. That's a huge amount of police officers being killed by their own gun.
So by the time you already go to the call, your adrenaline's already.
Here's what happened.
Okay, tell me.
Here's what happened. Usually people go through life and they're in just kind of clueless. Okay, so in law enforcement, you're driving around, you're always looking for things, right? You're always, being aware of what's going on. So we break it down, the adaptation syndrome idea of the fight or flight, we break it down in color. So adults retain more by color. So basically, on a normal day, I'm in yellow. Heart rate's normal. Aware of what's going on, but not super, excited. So now let's say we get a call or we see something. Now we obviously automatically go up to what we call orange, level orange. Color again, we retain more color, so orange. That's basically, I'm aware of something. So my heart rate starts going up a little bit from like 115 beats per minute, goes up a little bit.
Which is a natural response.
Natural response.
Yep.
But now, all of a sudden, my body starts secreting chemicals, serotonin, dopamine, adrenaline. It heightens my senses. Then at some point, we realize this is a fight or flight situation. Now, unfortunately, a lot of times in law enforcement, we can't run. We can tactically retreat, but we just can't run. We have to face those situations. So now the problem starts. Now my breathing starts increasing. My heart rate goes up. So now we enter into condition red, which my heart beat rate goes up to like 135 beats per minute, and my blood's really starting to pump. And my heart rate's going, my breathing's going up, and more of those chemicals are being released. Again, serotonin, dopamine. Okay. So at that point, I'm at the most optimal, efficient operational point, response-wise, body-wise. Everything's clear. This is where I get super strike. You've heard of like mothers ripping car doors off to get their child out, and great feats of strength. It's your optimal point. But what happens is, once we hit that peak, now my heart rate gets up around 150 beats, 157 beats per minute. And then all of a sudden, these crazy things start happening. We talked about some of them earlier. I get auditory exclusion, tunnel vision.
So auditory exclusion means you're not hearing right.
I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
I can't hear anything.
So I can be like, hey, Darren.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Which makes sense, because if that's the threat, you're not going to want to be like, hey.
Right. Not only that, but if the person's, next to me saying he's got a gun, I'm probably not going to hear that. Or, don't hurt him, he's got a mental illness, or, he's this, you're really not going to hear that. The other problem is my proper thought process decreases by 50%.
Okay, so I can't hear straight. My tunnel vision is focused on this person.
Right here.
And then what was the third one?
The other thing is my fine motor skills go out the window, like we talked about martial arts.
Oh, and you said your thought.
My proper thought process decreases by 50%.
Which means I can't make the best decisions.
No, not at all. Not at all. And then now I've got the other added problem of my fine motor skills go out the window. So trying to handcuff somebody it's not gonna work. Or trying to do some type of technical martial arts skill like kotegaeshi or something like that, it's not gonna work. So as this is all happening, now I'm starting to decline a little bit. And I'm losing my breath because I'm not breathing properly. Then what happens is I dump lactic acid. And once the lactic acid comes in, you're pretty much done. And
how long would that usually take? Does it depend on how much I exert myself?
Yeah, it depends on your physical condition.
Okay.
But usually 0 to 8 seconds.
Okay.
Which is a flash of an eye, right? Now, once the lactic acid dumps, now I've lost most of my strength. I start getting the shakes. I start getting nauseous. I start getting kind of dizzy. And at that point, if I don't have that person in custody or in control, I'm done. Because that's how a lot of these police officers are getting killed with their own gun. Because of all those variables that are playing into it. They don't see the guy taking the gun, or it's just a lot of variables that do that. So it's a scary situation.
So this is an important point I've actually never heard anybody talk about. When we see a police officer unfortunately kill somebody, or XYZ happens, no one talks about this. And as a martial artist, we understand that happens when you're grappling or you're sparring.
But they don't teach it either.
As far as
you
mean, the police officers are not.
Yeah, okay. They usually this program did.
You teach it.
We taught it through this,
but most don't.
They don't, because they for some reason they leave that out because it's a technical thing. They just think of the physical skill.
Right. That's more like concept mindset
and biological effects. Like, this is going to happen to you. You can't stop this. This is going to happen to you. You can slow it down by breathing. That's another thing.
Can you get, with experience, I don't want to say control it totally, but can you,
You can delay the effects.
But I guess it all depends on the event, too. Because, I mean, you're not delaying the effects if it's 3 guys with guns. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's a huge stimulus when you just be like...
A lot of the special forces, Navy SEALs, they call it the special forces.
I stand corrected. I was thinking from myself as like a martial artist.
They talk about the breathing.
Okay.
3-2-3 or 4-2-4, whatever it is. Basically, you're bringing more oxygen in. There's a new breathing technique I've been doing. It's called basically 5 in, 5 out. And it basically, hold it for a couple seconds. It oxygenizes your body, but it also allows the carbon dioxide in your body to set in, which gives you some clarity. So yeah, there are certain techniques you can do.
Okay, that makes sense.
Kind of slow it down a little bit, but you're not going to stop it.
But I think it's also hard because, like, okay, if you're in the SEALs or if you're in war, you're going to see that stimulus a lot more people with guns. If you're going to a traffic stop and 99 of 100 is a normal traffic stop, but then you're now in a situation where someone has a gun, right? You don't see that as much, whereas somebody in a combat situation.
You're correct, but it's the mindset too. I mean, I've been involved in a lot of use of force issues, incidents. I think 6 particularly deadly use of force situations where I was justified in using deadly force. And I was fortunate every time I didn't have to and came out unscathed physically. But in each of those incidents, I was in that zone.
Are you saying yourself personally, or you were in the review board?
No, I was in the zone. Oh, personally.
Personally.
Oh, personally. And I've testified on several cases in state and federal court as an expert on other persons' use of force and the reasons why they did that. But if you have an understanding of the dynamics of what's happening and be able to role play before, the biggest thing you can do when you're going to a call or anything you're doing, anything in life that you're doing that you have to do, and I can kind of project it in my mind beforehand, I'm already setting myself up for a positive outcome in some respects. Obviously, you got to be quick on the fly.
Right, and you have to have the training.
And the training.
I think that when we do self-defense, so we have a lot of women, right? So when we talk about self-defense of women, they're just normal women, right? They could be housewives, they could be whatever. They're not trained fighters. So we tell them to have their emergency response technique. Usually it's like an open palm or finger poke, which is like, this is what you're going to do if someone attacks you. So you already have it predetermined. So when someone does attack you, you just do it.
You go to high brain.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we do for self-defense, which you're just saying do the same thing in law enforcement.
Yeah. It comes down to muscle memory.
Well, I think the thing is, so this, like when, especially from martial arts, you've probably seen this. If someone has one technique to use, they're going to use it. If you've been martial arts for 30 years and you have 30,000 techniques, when the time comes to actually perform a technique, you don't know which one to use because you got so many.
You go right back to the one that's the
But you might not have time because you're like, should I do this technique? Well, this one, and then
distance is the other thing too.
Okay,
creating distance, because we know for a fact that if you're within 6 feet of somebody, that person can get to 1.2 seconds.
And the knife.
With a knife or with anything, they can get to 1.2 seconds. Your average response time is 2.1 seconds. So you're automatically at a disadvantage. So we break it down to public space, right, which is a little more than 6 feet out. So, but we can't. When we train law enforcement, when we train cops, we say, listen, keep 6 feet difference. The kill zone is 6 feet, but you can't effectively do your job
that far away.
Yeah,
I mean, just run away.
You can't. Hey, you got like a pole.
Yeah.
So we got public space, but then it obviously moves into personal space, which is within that 6 foot zone. And then we have intimate space, which is right on top. And from a martial arts perspective and a defensive tactics, only certain things are going to work within those.
Yeah. So we have like basically kicking range, punching range, close combat range, and your grappling.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Same idea. But from a law enforcement standpoint, we have intermediate weapons range, which is taser, nightstick, CAS, or weapon. Handgun.
And it's like you said, different things work at the different ranges.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so from a defensive tactics standpoint, I have to train my people to keep that in mind where I am within those ranges. Now, as we start moving in, we're talking to somebody, now we're moving in to get the license or registration or whatever we're doing, moving into it, now we're in personal space. My choice is limited because if I'm in personal or intimate, there's no way.
You can never get to the gun.
I'm not going to get to the gun. I'm not. And that's someone's first instinct. Oh, shit, to go to the gun. It's not going to happen. They're going to get you that quick. So other techniques with deflection techniques.
Well, now that raises a great point, because now if you haven't been trained with any kind of defensive tactics that you can actually employ, you're at a huge disadvantage if that guy's trained or if that woman's trained.
And that's a problem.
Just knock you out, then take your gun.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's the problem we're seeing, because a lot of people now are, like back in the day, Rhode Island was one of the biggest hubs in New England for martial arts. You had the Thunderbolts, you had all these other different kickboxing teams. But that's kind of changed. Now, MMA, obviously there's so many people out there training MMA.
Sure.
Even high school wrestlers. But everyone's kind of like a half-ass MMA guy. And that's a problem. So, but the other problem too is, we talked about earlier about, excessive use of force and the problems we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, right? And it's disturbing, because you see it being from the law enforcement field and being in the use of force realm, and you see these mistakes these police officers are making. It's obviously disheartening, but there's contributing factors to that. And one, few of them are, one, obviously, is lack of training, lack of understanding of what's going on. And the other thing is, when you really break it down and you look at what excessive use of force is and what are the contributing factors to excessive use of force, do you have any idea what they are?
So, so I would say the contributing factors to use of force would be, you said lack of training. I'd be like how nervous you are.
Fear.
Yeah, I would say it would be that.
Fear.
I would, I'd be your based personality.
Yeah,
like so. Much. Okay.
I'll give you an anger.
Okay.
Frustration.
So, and I go ahead. I want to add some of that.
So we get fear, anger, frustration.
All emotions. Yeah.
They're emotions. So knowing that, how do we keep those emotions in check? Because what happens is we tend to react, right? Because law enforcement, we try to be proactive.
Yeah.
But a lot of times in these situations, we react. And that's the problem, instead of responding. I know it's a play on words.
No, I got you.
It's a play on words.
Because one of the, we have team meetings every Monday. We have sales meeting and team meetings upstairs. And my goals were for 2023 not to emotionally react to things. Right now, I'm pretty good. But sometimes you might say something to me, and then I'll be like, all right, whatever. Emotion, you emotionally react to the stimulus instead of me. And this is what you said last night, stopping for a second and thinking about it and then giving you my response.
Which is a good point, because a lot of times I live under the 24-hour rule sometimes.
Was that the whole thing? Should I be?
No.
Okay.
I saw my hair flopping.
I got you. It looks great.
I saw my hair flopping.
Yeah, looks good.
See,
I'm learning.
I try to learn by the 24-hour rule. If something really pisses me off, because I'm very quick to act emotionally.
I think a lot of people are.
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah. Especially being an A-type personality.
But most people don't carry a gun.
Good point. But in
Except
regular
these.
in regular life.
Yeah.
You're quick to, I'm sometimes quick to, hey, f*** you. So I try to do the 24-hour, but we don't have that.
You don't have that, yeah, right.
In law enforcement. We respond to a call dealing with people who are disturbed, mentally disturbed, or just agitated, or don't like cops, or, especially the way the climate is today. And that's a big thing too. A lot of times the law enforcement, the cops are showing up to scenes, and right away they're being disrespected. They're being basically shit on. And because everyone's got a camera. So, they got it Rhode Island just passed legislation along with the Chiefs of Police Association of Rhode Island. So every police department in Rhode Island now will have the body cams. That's a whole different paradigm change. I couldn't imagine that back in my time. So now you've got to be very, very conscious of that, which is not a bad thing in some respects, but you're going to have some of these people that are going to have that learning curve problem with that.
Well, I think there's two things I want to say with that. So sticking with the body cam. So if I know how to subdue somebody, right, quickly, but I have a body cam, it might look worse than it is. So I might choose to use a different technique, which might not be as effective, thus putting me in danger, right? Because I might be considering what's this going to look like?
Again, going back to how do we deal and control our emotions, right? Fear is largely due to lack of confidence in your ability. So how do you address that? Training.
Right.
Right?
Do you have the time to train them like this much, though? With everything else going on?
No. To be honest with you,
This is what I'm saying.
The majority of cops, once they get out of the academy, it's the last time they train.
I agree. Yeah.
Right. So,
well, I mean, I don't really know, but
it's true. So how do you deal with that? You know what I mean? Maybe bolster up with your de-escalation skills. That's a whole other skill set that really wasn't really taught a lot on understanding the dynamics of confrontation. You know, staring at somebody or getting too close to somebody, getting in their personal space, touching people, you know, moving in on people. I was very fortunate, you know, throughout my career to have a lot of opportunities to do a lot of different things and attend a lot of different trainings. You know, witness interrogation has been numerous classes on that, which is great because it tells you how to get into somebody's head to get them to do what you want them to do or tell you what you want them to tell. So you can apply that skill set to dealing in de-escalating situations from a physical standpoint too. You know, so that frustration, you know, sometimes you come to work and you're just pissed off. You had a bad day at home or you didn't get promoted and you're pissed off. It's easy enough said than done, but you got to kind of compartmentalize that and put that away.
You take that with you. And one of the things I want to say, even as a physical therapist, and like, if I had something in my life that wasn't going well, but now I have to take care of 15 patients, right? You fix one, another or whatever, and that comes in, like you're just drained and like you're frustrated. Like sometimes you even get frustrated at patients, which I don't know if doctors will say, but you know, this the quote when you look into the abyss looks at you.
Yeah.
I think this is why a lot of doctors and a lot of police officers, I shouldn't say a lot, but doctors and police officers, because you're dealing with the public in these situations, it wanes on you.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? And that's why, like, you know, you get pulled over by a cop for a random traffic and he's an asshole, right? Like, you know, because I understand, like, you're pulling this person over, this and this, they're yelling at you. So now it already puts you in a position of being frustrated. You're angry. You want to serve the public, but you can't because everyone's shitting on you.
Yeah. Well,
where it just puts you in that, like.
Yeah, but again, you know, the old adage that, you know, was drilled into our head in the academy and really emphasized with us on a daily basis is treat the public how you'd want to be treated or how you'd want your family to be treated. So again, if you're reinforcing that in your head and you tell yourself, you know, like you said, step back for a little bit. If you feel yourself getting frustrated,
that's when you need to take a break.
Well, stand back, maybe breathe a little bit. You know, again, breathing is huge.
I'm just talking like on like a daily basis.
Well, yeah, but it's applicable. It's applicable in any situation, really. But it's even more so in a use of force situation. You know, so the anger thing. I mean, how do you put that aside? You know, you kind of have to, because that's going to make you do something you should have done because you're going to react versus respond. And
then on top of that, then you have all the not thinking clearly, tunnel vision, right? So then they all come together.
That's when you're engaged in a shit show.
Yeah.
And you're physically involved with somebody that you might have perpetuated and actually
I got you
pushed to the limit where you could have maybe stepped back a little bit and taken a different approach.
Yeah, because your vibe was already maybe a little bit confrontational in the first place.
Oh, because we all work on megahertz, right? Energy. You know, you can tell people's energy. You can walk in the room and see someone. If you start dealing with somebody right away and they're like all hyped up and, you know, it's that, and you are as well, you know, it just escalates. Like one of the great de-escalation techniques is when we're dealing with somebody and you walk in right away and they start, you know, what are you here for? What do you fucking break my balls? What do you want? Blah, blah, blah. Your natural instinct or response, because you're coming from an authoritarian position, right?
Is to be,
that's your vibe, right? That's your presence and persona. You know, that was one thing that kind of helped us with the state police, because our uniforms, the big Stetsons, the boots, the breeches, and, you know, being very squared away leaves a mental, an image, an impression with people. Years ago when I was a kid,
but just I want to go back to that. So if they're coming, so energy matches energy. But if you come in and they're yelling at you, how do you de-escalate that?
Perfect example. You're raising your voice, but I'll start off high just to get their attention. So now they kind of like, now we're like this.
Yeah.
And then slowly, my next communication with them is I bring it down. My tone, my speed of delivery, and also my volume.
So that's interesting, because when we talk about verbal diffusing from a male versus male perspective, right? You want to be at their level or below, because if they're here and you're here, you go up and eventually you get in a fight. When it's a female defending against a male, you want to be louder, right? Because why is that male attacking you? Because they think you're an easy target. They think you're not going to fight back. Well, if as a woman you're showing signs of being aggressive, then you're less likely to be attacked.
Yeah, makes
right?
sense.
That's what we would teach.
Well, yeah, it puts a second thought in the head.
Right.
But again, it all stems of delivery verbally and visually.
Posture.
And visually of your energy.
So,
and
yes,
another one that's helped me out immensely over my career.
Humor. Yeah, I can definitely see that. So,
absolutely,
which is interesting, and I knew you were going to say that because that's a big thing about you, is the fact that I use humor all the time to, number one, with patients, right? Because patients would always want to come into me, and I have to be like, well, Darren, what's wrong? I got this, this, and this, and I would change the subject instantly, right? Why? Because I know you're going to think about your pain all day long. So when you come to me as the PT, like we're going to change the subject to get your brain off it. Mm-hmm. I'm also going to joke around with you. Why? Because we know that humor will ease you up. It'll also allow your brain to relax. And now you're joking around. So when you're joking around, you're not in pain. You're not thinking about the pain, right? You're not in as much pain, I should say. So I've used that even the stuff here. If somebody, so we had a lady and a great lady. So she comes in, but now we have the mats, right? So there's a little place where you can walk, and then there's a mat. Well, she was coming in, but she was talking to me. As she came in, she was coming to my desk. Well, she tripped on the mat, and she basically fell. Now, most people, it's matted, but she was okay, but she fell like in front of me. And I was like, Diane, I'm used to women falling all over me, right? But why did I say that? Because I wanted to make sure that she knew that, like, it's okay. Like, no one's laughing at you. I made a joke. She laughed. We're good. Versus me being like, oh my God, are you all right? Yeah. Right. So I was able to, and she was good. But like I use that. I learned that from my father, right? Being able to use that to even getting people comfortable with me. A lot of times we do different things, or I wear different jackets or whatever. I want people to understand that, like, I'm easy to talk to. This is going to be a nice process. You can trust me, and then we can get to the goals that you want to get to. But humor isn't something that everyone has.
It's all in the delivery.
It actually is.
It's totally in the delivery. And remember too, like you said, it makes the person, if it works, it makes them feel good. That also releases a chemical in the brain. That again, it comes down to releasing different chemicals. How we think.
It's chemically based.
It's chemically based.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So how can I, knowing that, how can I manipulate that in some respects? Again, through verbal tone in my physical.
It actually brings me, a lot of times, and then patients would love it. They'd be like, oh, whatever, my shoulder really hurts. I'd be like, yeah, but you look great. Yeah. And they'll be like, yeah. Instantly, like, yes, because everyone's vain.
And the other thing too is, and I've done this a lot, not a lot, but it's been very effective. When you're in a situation it's definitely a curveball when you're in uniform and you do something like this. But I've used it out of uniform as a civilian life. That if it's you're edging towards an altercation that you really don't want to be involved in, and you try some of the things, you try to be humble, you try to be empathetic, and it's just not working. The person's hell bent on getting physical with you. There's nothing wrong with what we call street theatrics. And, over the years, I've worked with a lot of different police officers from different police agencies. And the ones that I found to be the best are the ones that really have perfected the street theatrics craft.
Which are what?
Which is, doing something like that and looking around or saying something crazy. Or,
like interrupt the thought pattern?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like, what the fuck?
Well, tell me. I know exactly what you're going to tell me.
One of my favorite ones. And I kind of got in trouble when I was in the state police. I used to go up.
Well, now you're not on the state police.
I know, but I used to do public speaking a lot for women interactions.
Self-defense, yeah.
Yeah, we just do it for, but you can't teach defensive tactics like to women in a 15-minute or 20-minute break. Talk about, stranger danger or watching out for this.
Listen, I've mastered it in 60 minutes, just so you know. So I have the solution to this, but go ahead.
Well, my big thing was, and I've done this. I've done this several times to test it. So someone's being confrontational with you, or you see somebody, because no one's going to just randomly come up and attack you. They're going to be, from a female perspective type of thing, or even just confrontation between.
There'll be signs.
There's going to be signs, like we talked about before, right? There's going to be signs. So the idea is to be kind of cued into that. But at some point, you're going to really know, that there's a problem, and you're going to try to de-escalate, and it's not going to work. If it doesn't work, and all of a sudden, you get a problem now, it's fight or flight, or you get down to business. Best thing ever. And I kind of got in trouble when I was teaching this. I was doing a women's group, and I did it, and they all laughed, and they really liked it. And apparently somebody ran into the colonel at the time and told him about it, and he was like out of his mind. Called me in his office. And, what did you do? What did you teach? So I had to explain to him, and he was horrified.
So explain to me what it is.
Basically, okay, now this is important. So they look at you, and you get ready, and you go like this, just a little like this, comes in, and you go just like that.
I would not touch you.
Trust me, if they won't. They first of all, the response I've got is like, what the? or this, or oh my God. I've done it. I've done it a couple times too, because when I was commuting back and forth, when I was working in New York City, get on the train on a Friday afternoon, and you don't want all these people sitting on top of you, and they'd come walking by, some church come by, and they're staring at you, and just like that, and they would keep on walking.
Yeah.
I had my own seat to myself, but it's worked. It's worked several times, and actually, more than once, but one time in very particular, I remember vividly.
I think you got stuff there now too. Yeah, just you're good. You're good. Yeah.
That's another one too. You're talking to some
just
guy,
leave it there.
Talking to some guy, he's got to go. My other favorite one, which you got to be really careful too, because this one could go either way. I got a call tonight for a bar and brawl down in Hope Valley, and I was doing trouble. So I got there, and it was kind of like a biker bar. And I walked in, and the guy was a big biker dude, and the fight was over, but he was still being very aggressive to everybody. So I walked in, and I said, you gotta leave, and he was, F you, and, I'll kick your ass, and this and that. So I, tried the old, I said, I really don't want to fight you. Just get done shining all my gear and this and that. And he was like, oh, he started giving me some shit. So I just went, and I went, what? And he looked, as soon as he looked down, whoop, and I went, knucklehead. And I pulled back, and he was completely stunned. And then it was that awkward kind of time thing. He really wasn't sure what he was going to do. But the whole bar broke out laughing. And at that point, he had lost
all muster.
He lost all muster. He lost all self-respect.
Yeah.
He didn't know what to do. And then he thought he was like a kid again. And he was like, he
probably saved him.
He saved him. It saved him a night in jail and hospital bill.
Yeah.
But he put his head down and walked out. And everybody just kind of looked at me, and they're laughing. See ya.
Yeah, and again, that's a special skill set. You have to have that part of your personality to pull that off.
Yeah, and not be aggressive and do it.
Yeah, so
those little tricks of the trade.
I want to switch gears to how has the martial arts helped you in life? So we trained with the same instructor, Richard Petronelli. So, and I know they have the clip to put in this, but he probably had like the fastest hands I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
Right?
And powerful.
Yeah, and just rock solid. So like from him, like obviously I had the benefit of having him, but like other people came to him because he was that good.
Yeah.
So I was learning from him, and then I learned from someone like you or like Albert Bruce.
Look at the martial arts over the years with him.
Yeah.
Well renowned from the Philippines to Japan.
Yeah, he wasn't just your average instructor.
No. And people gravitated to him, and because he was that good of a guy, and that good of a guy, and that good at his craft. Professor V, I mean, he was just a kid when he was coming around. I mean, he was literally this big.
I'm slowly morphing into him.
Yeah. I'll never forget when he was we had the school up in, when he started up the school up in, by J.R.'s Fastlane.
Yeah, Cranston.
Cranston. And he came up with this big entourage from New York. And, he had to have been in his 80s then. And he called out Mr. James, his head student, who was jacked. I mean, he didn't even know.
Who's the head of the system now?
Yeah, he was the head of the system. I mean, he was so jacked and mean looking, he didn't even have to know martial arts. He called, and I was in uniform too, because he called me out first. And he goes, I showed this technique. I trust me, I'm in uniform, I can't. So he goes, all right. So he called Mr. James out. And he basically did a pakwa step over in a backhand. He hit him, not even like, it didn't even look like he hit him that hard, but you could see the energy transfer from his little skinny body. Because
then he was probably 5 feet, 100 pounds?
If that. Yeah. He was like 80 years old. It literally caved his chest in and knocked him 5 feet.
Professor V was Philindo Visitation.
Yes.
Right? And David James, who now runs the VR Institute.
He Paquad and tapped him after that. And it wasn't like Professor James faked it, because you could see the energy literally transferring to his body.
Yeah, so one of the things I've always been impressed with is just the way that Richard moves his hands. Like I still can't emulate it. I trained with him the longest pretty much of everybody.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of the stuff, but just the way he right?
Snaps.
Yeah, I'm like, what? Now, I'm usually shorter than my adversary, right? So
Which is an advantage, though.
It can be, but I don't have the advantage to be like over the top. So I have to bring them down to me. Yeah. So like some of the techniques I have to, change it. But the way he just hits, and obviously we've both been hit by it. Me as a child, right? Like a teenager. Yeah, but in the martial arts, you have this weird code of like, no, it's cool. Throw me on the concrete. I'll get back up, But just from the training in the martial arts, what values have you learned from it that you've taken through in your life? So for me, the biggest thing was like the discipline, and not giving up, and especially with like a business and the business through COVID. We bounced off COVID and skyrocketed up, where most studios or most gyms, it was 40% went out of business.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So that's United States. So think how many gyms were under. We stayed disciplined. We still trained. We improved the way we did it. And then we're a bigger business now than we were before. That's the big thing for me, the discipline. Did you have any?
Discipline? Absolutely. The insight into not only just the technical skills or the physical skills, but the spiritual aspect of it, in the whole understanding of the full mind-body connection. The contacts I've made, the opportunity through Richie to meet and train with other great martial artists, who had their own uniqueness about them, their own unique training style. It's given me a ton of confidence, not just in the martial arts world of fighting or just confidence in general.
So I think that's an interesting thing, because for me, you talk about the mind-body connection. Yeah. So for me, it was always like, okay, you have three things. You have your mind, your body, and your spirit. That really comes from the martial arts. I had heard Maya Angelou say that on Oprah one day when I was 13. Why I was watching it, I don't know. I kind of liked it. But for that to stick with me as a third
books to read.
Yeah. But so you have to improve your mind, right? So I went to college, did all this stuff. Your body, I work out. Your spirit, like the things that you do and being creative and stuff like that. I really learned that from the martial arts, as far as this is what I need to do. That's the martial arts way. When you talk about confidence, so I derive my confidence from being in the martial arts and being around the people in it. So a lot of people today are just living, inopportune lives. They're not doing anything with their lives. So when they see somebody who is confident and following their passion and stuff like that, to them, they see the big gap, right? And they're like, hey, Darren, you're narcissistic or you're bragging. When it's like, no, I'm just confident doing my thing. But that confidence comes from my upbringing as a martial artist, understanding that you're going to fail, but as long as you keep going, you'll get the next belt, right?
Well, yeah. When I say confidence, not to be a braggart or tell people what you've done.
I think sometimes people think when you are confident, you're bragging when you're just doing your thing.
Well, I would say quietly confident. It's a confidence within you that you don't have to tell people about.
Yeah.
Or show off about. Because we're all, not all of us, but a lot of us are showmen. That A-type personality.
I'm an only child, so I
don't know. It's given me the opportunity to train law enforcement around the country for years. I mean, you were a big help to me how many students over the year that were trying to become police officers?
Yeah, you came here. Yeah.
That you'd allow me to take them here and train them. I mean,
I think I've gotten off on a few tickets because of that.
Probably,
just so you know.
I've got a crew of I've got an army of 40 something cops from all over the state.
Yeah,
different police departments. A recent one, Matt Levine on the Capitol Police.
Mm-hmm.
He just called me a couple weeks ago. So the opportunity to spread that information or that.
So this is an interesting thing. I was hearing somebody say if you go into your genre, right? And you're asking for advice for somebody in the field, business or whatever. They're not going to give you all the advice they could give you, right? So like if I went to somebody like, hey, like how do you like run that martial arts school? They're going to give me advice, but not give me all the advice. It isn't until they retire in the art of the game where they really want to tell you everything you need to know to be successful. Now, for you being retired, right? Do you take more pride in now these people coming through? So like you're still connected to the law enforcement, but training the next crop, so to speak?
Yeah. You know, the thing too, I never charged them.
You're right.
Ever. Just because Richie never charged me.
It's one of the many downfalls.
I mean, I kept them on going to jail several times, but no.
Do you know that like 98% of martial arts schools aren't profitable?
No.
Yeah.
No. It's almost it's
like a club.
Yeah. I feel it's my responsibility in some respects to pass on that knowledge or insight to people, starting in the world of law enforcement, because it's potentially a lifesaver in some respects.
And it's given you everything you know.
Yeah, I've made some great friends over it. You know what I mean? And like lifelong friends, or people that I can count on now. That if I need to call, and it makes me feel good to see them do very well. Like one of my students was an intern on the state police. Then he got on the state police, and Garrett Hassett used to come here all the time back in the day. He ended up was on the state police. I forget how many years he was on the state police, maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe a little long. But now he's with the FBI. And one of the gratifying things to me was when we called. It was during COVID when we graduated, so I couldn't go to his graduation. But he said, "I gotta really thank you, because I was like a superstar in the FBI Academy with the defensive tactics." Okay. So it was kind of
validation.
Yeah, and very fulfilling. Worth more than any money he could give me over the years.
Yeah,
it's a business, so it's a different aspect.
Sure, I get that.
To me, it wasn't a business; it was a hobby.
Yeah, that's how I make a living.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But don't forget, it was a hobby for 20 years before that.
Oh yeah.
But we also understand too, like if you can generate profit, I can get better equipment for everybody. Your level of service can go up, right? So when you kind of go into that realm,
that's
it makes
why I have
sense.
you, because I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, can I train somebody?
Yeah, sure. In the basement.
But I think for me, like even the martial arts, like the community of people, like I do this podcast. I have so many people I can call, right? Hey, Darren, you want to be on the podcast? I mean, it took you about 6 months, and I remember I texted you while you were alive, but I didn't know that you actually almost weren't alive, right?
I was kind of sick.
So when we talk about healing, and we're going to talk about, kind of what happened, if you want to share that, it's really the mindset that gets you through it.
Yeah.
Right?
The mindset, the awareness of the power of your mind, and the breathing that goes along.
So tell me what happened. Because when you relate it to me, just the way you relate it to me, you were jovial, you were joking around, and I already knew just by the way you related to me, I was like, oh, he's gonna make a full recovery. You weren't like, oh, what was me? I got to see, you know what I'm saying?
I wasn't home. Ask Tammy, she'll tell you.
But tell me what happened.
I've had a problem with my prostrate for like 15 years. BPH, it's a large prostrate, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And I was in Dallas, Texas, a couple months ago for the ICPA, International Police Association conference, and I forgot to take my medicine, which regulates my urine, and basically my urethra closed down, so I couldn't urinate. So I ended up getting septic, which happened 2 years ago to me, which I didn't know I was septic at home, and didn't go to the hospital because I just thought it was the fever. And I spiked like 106-degree temperature, and my body started shutting down, which I didn't.
This is in Texas.
No, this was 2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago. Okay.
2 years ago. And then my body went to convulsions and yada, 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 and I just slept through it and sweated it out.
As most men would probably.
Yeah, and when I went to the doctors the next day, because it was a holiday weekend, when I went on a Tuesday, they did blood work, and they were like, you almost died. Everything was shutting down. So I kind of had experience with it. But fast forward several months ago, in Texas, pretty much the same thing was happening. So I flew home.
But they told you to go to the doctors there, which you still flew home.
Go to the emergency room in Chicago. I'm like, you out of your mind? I'd still be there. In case they had shootings and everything else. Like, oh, he's got a large prostrate. So I finally got home and
triage,
yeah, I got into Roger Williams, and they had to catheterize me, and they drained like 2 full bags, and the doctor said it was medically and humanly impossible that I retain that much urine. So I was like, cool. So I was on the bag for like 2 weeks, which was actually pretty good because
you didn't have to move.
We didn't have to get out of bed 15 times a night. I just dumped the bag in the morning. I went to work and I had the leg bag, and I'm sitting at the desk and I'm like, ooh.
I mean, most people wouldn't handle this like that,
well,
like you did.
Yeah, but I mean, I always see the weird things in life.
Well, where did that come from, though? Like
my upbringing.
Yeah.
You think it's funny? I was thinking about that tonight before you came over. You know, you talk about the Irish humor type of thing.
Yeah.
But if you look at cultures that historically have been beaten down, like the Irish were, it's either they're very angry or they're very
jovial.
Silly,
yeah.
Jovial, make fun of everything and let things roll off their back. I mean, you look at like some Eastern Bloc countries that again have had the same plight of being put down and tortured and just miserable. A lot of them are very angry. They don't let it go.
Well, one of those is constructive. One of it's deconstructive, right?
Yeah.
If you hold on to the anger, you're going to develop all those issues, right? The longer you anger, the more health issues pop up.
Yeah.
The more you can let stuff roll off you, you're more zen.
I would think, yeah. I mean, it's a coping mechanism.
Yeah, sure.
You know, sometimes it's a coping mechanism. You know, I mean, I've had post-traumatic stress disorder for years. You know, certain smells will set it off or something like that, but you always kind of find, you know, humor in somehow.
Which you think you have to.
Oh, yeah, I do, yeah. You know, I mean, what's the other option? You know, bummed out and miserable. I mean, I'm that a lot too, but...
Yeah, but I just think that, like, that becomes that, you know, your personality becomes how you react to things. And over time, you develop, this is how I react, right? And you could see it with patients. The ones who reacted more negatively to, like, a stimulus are the ones who are chronically sick.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right?
And what's learned behavior?
And then you don't get out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and so that's when, you know, when you treat patients, you want to make them start joking around, right? You want, like, listen, it doesn't have to be that serious. If the patient or the client can trust in the provider, we're good. Everything will work out.
Yeah, but see, that's a different mindset. Excuse me, from a provider's perspective as well, because you're passionate what you do.
You want to help people.
Well,
yeah.
But a lot of people in that business or in law enforcement or in any job they do or any career they do, if you're not really passionate about it,
if you're just doing it for a paycheck,
yeah, you're just going through emotions.
Yeah.
And you know, like I tell my daughters, you know, whatever you do in life, if you really are passionate about what you're doing and look forward to going to work every day, you know, it's a cliche. I look forward to going to work every day. You know, 25 years in the state police, there was days I didn't want to go to work. But for the most part, I couldn't wait to get to work. You know, and that way with you know, the new job and in my other career, you got to be passionate about it, because if you're not, it's a long time to spend doing something you don't want to do.
So I think one of my dilemmas in life is I have pretty much the most fun when I'm at work. So it's really boring for me when I'm not at work, right?
Yeah.
Because I always say, like, people always come to me, like, this is my studio, hundreds of people come to me, and I always see the best versions of themselves. So everybody who comes into my doors, like, shows me the best version because they want to get better. They're in that mode. And like, you know, even these past 2 days, I've been like off the wall silly, where like there's a class going on and I was like, hey, Josh, watch this. There was like the big exercise balls. I dove, did like a roll. Like, I'm in the middle of, like, it's my studio, right? Okay, cool. It happened. Well, I went to do it again. The ball bounced onto the client, like the big exercise, like onto their face. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm so sorry. I did it a third time and the ball went back. I was like, oh man, I got to stop this, right?
You didn't have a silly costume on this time.
No, but like, I mean, when you're in rapport, you know, it really helps if the balls fall on their face. So, you know, but like, this is where I have my fun, you know, and sometimes I have to be like, you know, I can be serious, but like,
No, but
this is where you make change. And listen, there's nothing more gratifying than seeing somebody who changed their life just because they met me.
Yeah.
But that's the payoff.
yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally get that.
I mean, your life is infinitely better for meeting me.
Yes,
You know,
it is. And I think about it a lot at night. It's kind of weird. No, I agree, because again, I share the same perspective, again, because it's passion for what you're doing. I share the same thought process when I'm thinking about my martial arts students. or the people I've interacted with over my 25-year career. I mean, I still have people that, you know, I met over my career. I was always of the mindset. Yeah, I always remember my father telling me when he was on the state police, you know, he had a really good career. You know, caught the Boston Strangler and was very, you know, well known and
Elbow to salva.
Yeah. That's all I got on down here because, you know, my father's reputation preceded him, and plus he didn't want me to go to the Mass State Police to ruin his reputation, so I came down here. But I always remember him telling me that, you know, he kind of told a story that, you know, when he was in uniform as a trooper, you know, he stopped a car. Three kids in the backseat of the car eating the ice cream, and they're yelling and screaming, and the wife was yelling at him, you know, because he got stopped. And, you know, like, you could tell the guy was just a hard-working guy. And, you know, he recognized that, and he you know, went out of his way to bolster this guy up in front of his family. And obviously didn't give him a ticket or anything like that, and, you know, made him look big in front of his family. And, you know, and when he drove away, he said to me, you know, there's enough good guys out there to give a break to, and there's enough asshole bad guys out there to deal with.
That's a great point. I think everyone needs to understand that.
Yeah, and you know, in my years in law enforcement and just life in general, you know, I truly believe that the majority of good people that make bad decisions, and, you know, for whatever reason, and then on the other hand, there's truly evil people out there that mean harm to a lot of people. You know, the knucklehead Nido, and you know,
who was it?
The one that slaughtered those 4 students.
Oh.
You know, and there's throughout history. I mean, you see it every day. It's even worse now, I think, than before. It's more publicized. But the bottom line is, if you have an opportunity, I think, from a law enforcement perspective, and even a martial arts instructor perspective, it's your obligation to help people and make their life better. Again, you know, over the years, I've had the opportunity to help out a lot of kids that were on the wrong path. Arrested a couple of them, and then, you know, kind of helped them out, get them on the right way. You know, whether it was through a couple smacks but, you know, followed up with them. I mean, I've still got kids that, you know, they're in their 30s with kids now calling me.
Well, sometimes, and I don't want to get too deep into this, but sometimes they just need that male role model
to
show them. And that was a huge thing. So obviously, I had my dad, right? Great role model. But I had my martial arts instructors to show me how I should conduct myself, right? Yeah. Especially going through the 80s and the 90s. Oh, this is how I should act. Now, I mean, some of the things I didn't want to copy from my martial arts instructors, but just like how to act, I was like, okay, I get this. Now let me tie in this part of my personality, and then I pop up, you know. But
it's all to your development. It's all towards your development as a person.
Yeah, and back to what you're saying. So I always hope that everybody who interacts with me is better off from knowing me. Like, even if I have a little piece of it, you know, we had a podcast, and like, one of the clients, like, I want to thank you so much for, you know, doing all this, having this program, being who you are. I was like, you did all the work. I'm just showing you the light, you know, because this is what I do. I can help everybody who wants to be helped, whether it's physical therapy, whether it's martial arts, whether it's fitness, whether it's just learning how to, like, what steps they should take. I can help everybody as long as you have a desire, right? But you have to have the desire to do it. Which brings me to my last question. So somebody's watching this now. They want to change their life. It's not where they want it to be, and they don't know where to start. So what advice would you give them, if you want to look into that camera, and what advice would you give them on how to change their life and start living the life that they want to live? Don't creep them out.
Get your shit squared away. I'm coming looking for you. No, I think a lot of self-analysis. You know, I mean, it's easy enough said than done, but to be really honest with yourself as far as, you know, what your good points are, what your strong points are. I mean, everyone has them. And again, be honest and recognize what your weaknesses are and what your you know, bad points are, and then how to address that, and how do you know, what do you want out of life? Life is really short. That's one thing I've realized after being on death's doorstep several times, most recently. But, you know, life's too short, and to live life with regret for whatever reason, and whatever the complication is, whatever the issue is, that you can fix it. You can you can fix it without a doubt. Whether it's physical, mental, spiritually, you can fix it through physical therapy, through training, through meditation, through pharmaceuticals. I mean, there are options out there to fix it, but you just have to look at it, recognize it, and address it head up, and have the courage to do that. And know that you're going to fail sometimes. You're going to fall back in the same perspective. But once you do fall back, realize that you're back in that box and look at options on how to get out of that box just to make your life better.
And basically take action and know you're not alone.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to reach out to different people.
Everybody needs a coach.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's one of the biggest things I've learned.
And a friend.
And a friend. And that could be the same person.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Darren, thank you for this. I thought that was excellent. Lifelong friend.
Make me look good. Because I will find you. When I was the PIO for the State Police Public Information Officer, which the fact that they had me even doing that job was bizarre to me and everyone that knows me. I used to tell the reporters, who's editing this? and I'd say to them, this is a small state. You better make me look good. I will find you.
Yeah, I think we're going to lower your chair a little bit so I'm higher than you, so I look like I'm...
If you brush my double chin, that'd be good too. That's why I have my call.
We'd have to do nothing with your hair because it looks great.
Pretty good, huh? What about the beard?
Hello, my name is Dr. Marc Bochner. Don't forget to check out my new book, Pug Learns to Believe. Hey guys, Dr. Marc here. Now I know a lot of you want to know how we get all these amazing results with our clients, and it comes down to 3 things. The first is fun fitness classes that burn a lot of calories. 2 is giving you an accountability coach to make sure you stay on track and get the best results. And 3 is the nutrition. Included in the nutrition is our food supplements. So we pair with Prestige Labs because I feel they are the best, they have integrity, and they get great results. These are actually the supplements that I take as well. Here's the awesome part. By clicking the link below, you can save 40% off the retail price. So you need that link to actually save 40%. If you just go to the normal site without my link, you're paying full price, okay? So these are the supplements my clients use. If you are interested, definitely click the link below and it'll tell you all about them.